Ladies and gentlemen, you are requested to kindly be seated. Mr. Vikramjit Singh, partner PwC, will make the presentation on the thought paper, Navigating Privacy and Protection in India's Healthcare Digital Frontier. And the digital copy of the thought paper will be available in our website. Shorbani and the team working behind this program will be emailing to all registered participants from where you can download the thought paper. In couple of minutes time, we'll be commencing the session, the presentation on the thought paper by Mr. Vikram Singh.
Good morning, everyone. Sorry for taking a bit of time on this one. And continuing on very passionate thoughts that shared by multiple dignitaries which were there on the stage a few minutes back. Continuing as the theme, responsible healthcare. And what I will try to share through maybe next 15-20 minutes is a important part of this overall concept, responsible healthcare, from a privacy angle perspective. And before I get into the slides, maybe you can get rid of photo. Okay. Before I get into the slides, privacy as a concept is not really an alien to all of us. We need to experience it on everyday basis. And I would want to highlight two, you can call it ends of the continuum or aspects from privacy. Sayantan spoke about 1.5 billion, all of us citizens of India. So the act or whatever we need to do from privacy perspective also impacts us as individuals. And then, of course, we represent some businesses or organizations. So the organizations hold some responsibility. So there are a few things which need to be done from an organization perspective. And as in both end of the spectrum, and we use the word culture also. So while we are a beneficiary of the act as 1.5 and me included, every one of us included are beneficiary of the act eventually. But then responsible organizations, if they bring it in stride, not just as a compliance, but as a culture, as Sayantan highlighted, we would bring a big change. And we use a term called trust. And trust is a very important item. And what I can tell you, enough research material available. If everything else is equal, we have an organization which is able to demonstrate by day-to-day operations or day-to-day practices that they care of their consumers or their human interaction points data better. They respect their privacy. People would want to go take services or goods from that organization, and which is very clearly experienced by all of us. As in, if you look at Apple versus Android, from a feature set perspective or tech capabilities perspective, we may have multiple other options available in Android ecosystem, but we place much higher or we pay much higher to buy an iPhone because we believe privacy is better there. And this is not really a topic which is very far off. You go to any of the large, let's call it a social media or big tech players, you start looking at their balance sheets. One big item is revenue of stream coming from ad revenue. And if you examine it closely, there's an adage which goes like, if a service is free, you are the product. And they have leveraged all of us, not just 1.5 billion, but then 7 billion population, or maybe 4.55 billion population, which is on internet today, which leverages services from Meta or other world majors, tech majors. So they collect data on us, and then we get pointed ads, as in, please don't get surprised. You do a search on a website and then you go anywhere, the same ads are following you. So it is pointed ads coming to you. So that's one aspect, but then how do we go about and how do we really map it to our environment and our industry is what we are trying to touch base here. I know that we have not really baked in time for Q&A, but then I'll remain here, happy to address any questions, observations, or even thoughts that you have to share. So we'll be very happy to deliberate further on this. I'll go through these slides quickly and hope they are useful. And once again, as Sayantan highlighted, Thanks for the chamber to enabling this opportunity, and privilege and honor to be here sharing these thoughts with you. Okay, so if you look at digitization, I think almost every speaker spoke about it, as in the previous sessions. What we are seeing, why this topic matters to us. Rapid digitization is happening, and the way we treat, way we serve our not just patients, as in other people who are taking healthcare services, it is changing rapidly, very, very rapidly. Explosion of health data and generation, we are talking about wearables, and they are generating this data on 24/7 basis. And these are not really lifestyle wearables. Now we have some wearables which are quote unquote medical wearables also. They generate a lot of data, so we need to maybe think about that. Rising cyber threats, and healthcare as an industry, not just in India, globally also, would remain a target, as in very clearly a target is always about what is there to gain. And from that data perspective, the hackers, if they can really arm twist an organization and get a ransom out, that's what they would want to target. And then unfortunately, this industry has remained under attack, and I don't think that pattern is going to change. And regulatory focus. In fact, we will try to touch, of course, DPDPA is there. DPDPA is Digital Personal Data Protection Act. The act was really, from bill to act, it was passed in a couple of years back. But then the rules were released in November 2025, and from that point, government has given about 18 months to comply. So May 27 is the date when this would really become enforced law. In every organization need to demonstrate that they are doing things right. So the regulator focus is what I'm referring to here. Okay, and touching some more on the digital shift. And if you look at, I won't really go through all of these pointers, but then I'm sure all of you relate to them. We experience them everyday basis, whether it is about smart devices, AI-driven decision making. And lots of us as in speakers spoke about AI-driven decision making, which is a great help. But then the models, as we say, underlying LLM, could be sitting anywhere. Do we have control on, if we leverage a model, where the data is landing? Who would have access to the data? Those are the concerns that we may want to really think about. Wearable, I spoke, predictive health analytics, and this could be huge, is in benefit to patients or people who are not patient today but may develop something down the line. But then once again, that data needs to be contained. How it needs to be leveraged needs to be thought through. So those are things that we may want to worry. Telemedicine and virtual care, excellent and needed, as in from the vast and scale of our country and the kind of multi-ethnicity and multi kind of economic backgrounds that we have. We need telemedicine or those kind of scenarios to be made available. But then once again, do we need to be careful on how do we interact? The patient or the person is not interacting with someone who is not actually who he or she is claiming to be. How do we really bring those kind of pointers? Those are thoughts that we need to think through. Mobile health apps, as in the apps we know there are fake apps available on various Google Store, etc. How do we ensure that the right app is being used? As in these are interaction points. The big or small of this is these are interaction points. They are exploding. They are not really increasing. And when we think through privacy or safeguarding patient or all interaction, in fact, we use a word from a privacy principles perspective, data principle, which is every human individual. So when we are creating processes, we need to think through all of these. Now, moving on, the foundation of trust is, and if you look at it, when we are especially talking about in healthcare and industry, why, if we want to go after the big picture question, why do we want to do it? Empower patients with data control. So look, the basic premise or tenet from a privacy is we want to empower an individual, and which is all of us, but then all interactions point which we have from a healthcare perspective, they should be able to decide what interactions do we have. And I don't really want to get into too much of specifics of the act, but then we use two keywords there. When we are taking consent, and I have a bit of information on consent, we want to be explicit and specific. And if I were to dwell on those two keywords, explicit is a reference of, I want to be very sure what data points I'm acquiring of an individual. And it should not be random, as in, a typical interaction point we would have experienced. A loan agent comes in and they are very random. Okay, give me 3 address proofs, 2 ID proof, and do they need all of that? Is the process requires, or the use case that we are serving require all that data points? We need to be conscious. The second and important point, which is empowering control in the individual, is what is the use case? If we are serving as a patient, we need to give them this data would be used to serve you as a patient, but it cannot be then used as a marketing activity or for a reach out or tabling another product. If we want to do that, intend to do it, let's be very clear. Specific is the point. When I'm taking a consent, I'll announce, I will use this data for 1, 2, 3, 4 clearly, and it cannot be the data may be used for. Those sentences are not okay. Secure and compliant data sharing. This is an important point, and this needs a lot of thinking and people, process, technology enablement in our organizations. As in securing the data and ensuring data sharing. Look, data sharing would happen. Even the most sensitive data set would need to be used, because that's why we have first thing either collected or created it. It would need to be used. How do we secure it? And securing is not just saying on a paper you can put it in a locker, but then digital information, it will go through various systems. There are multiple concepts which need to be applied, as in minimizing the use or need to know basis. How do we ensure if the data is only need to be seen by 3 sets of doctors, only those get to see, no other person gets to see that data, as in that's a need to know basis. When it is sitting on a system, do we need to apply encryption, masking, or other security controls so that we can safeguard the data? If you are sharing, how do we ensure that it is only on need to know basis, and when sharing, the other recipient is also not forwarding it without our consent or without our knowledge, etc. So those are controls we may want to enable, need to enable. Privacy as a pillar, not as a barrier, and this is point Shanta also touched. From a culture perspective, it could be seen that, okay, there's a law, I need to comply, but it can be seen as a business enabler. What we may want to do, if we bake this in our business processes right, it can become a business enabler and a differentiator for a business. And I was in a session, separate session, CEO of the organization in the room, and he highlighted from his vision perspective, this is about and. How do we think through the business processes and privacy? It is not or, as in we are not trying to balance. How do we bring them together and then do the right things is something that we need to see. That's why what we may want to think is privacy by design or privacy first kind of principles when we are creating new products or solutions for serving our patients and other interaction points. And data governance, transparency. Look, I would want to touch on this point. If you look at any apps where you buy something, they make it super easy. As in you can very easily scroll through, browse the directory of options, and then choose what payment is super easy. Just in 3 clicks, you can complete your sales transaction. But then you look at other side of experience. If you were to give a consent somewhere, there could be a 30-pager. You need to scroll and then say, yeah, I agree. And there's no way you'd be able to read through everything. Can we change that experience? Can we make it as simple as buying, saying, these are 5 things I'm acquiring? It can be, of course, highlighted, and there could be a scroll bar. I will use this for 3 use cases. If you're not comfortable, slide back. I will not use it. Can we make it that simple? So if we do that, that's about creating the transparent data governance where we are saying your data, I'll use it in line with your consent and your guidance, and you have full control available for the life cycle of data. Very quickly, we have, of course, you have the report available. Digital copy, as we highlighted, would be made available to everyone. View hard copies. But then we had done a few surveys, and I have a couple of snippets on this. And sorry. And some of these surprises have sprung up. So if you look at it, uh, what is the purpose? And while we are aligned well on the purpose, but then a second question, do we have a clear understanding requirement of DPDP Act? Unfortunately, only 45% are saying mostly clear. So, and this is about an act which is in place for 2 years. It has been enforced. Now we need to comply in maybe 13, 14 months time. And most organizations still very not clear on what do we need to comply for. So this has to change, understanding of the act, and then what all do we need to do needs to become well ingrained in our thinking system, processes, etc. This is something, an opportunity for all of us. Touching very quickly on the journey, I spoke about this. We are having a discussion around this from 2017-18. Incidentally, so just around the time GDPR, the Europe law on privacy, which has gone live around that time. And November 25 is momentous from this journey perspective, because we have the rules and we have a clear mandate or a guideline available that we need to comply by the 13th May 2027. Okay, very quick gist, and I'll strongly recommend, if people are not familiar, please spend some time. The gadget notification, which is only a 30-page document, is available. And enough and more information is available. Very happy to share more information around. But then two key highlights, if you look at it. This is within Indian boundary as a territory, and this is about digital data. Now, important really point to note, paper data, if it remain paper data, is not in ambit, but then in some shape and form, if someone has taken a photo, secured it, we have scanned the data and brought it in systems, then once again it becomes in ambit. And second point I would want to highlight, this is not today onwards. So if we have data for subjects for last 10 years, we are still answerable for that data. We would need to at least send notices, secure consent, etc. So that's something that we need to do. I've touched these dates. I will also pass on the rules. Important point, and especially if you have structure, I'm sure some of our businesses have served global customers. We may have some GDPR compliances. The Rule 4 and Rule 8 especially are slightly different vis-a-vis GDPR. And while every rule needs to be paid attention to, but then these one, and in our industry and in healthcare industry, we would have a lot of touch points, interactions with minors and persons with disabilities. There we need to be additionally careful and need to handle the data slightly differently vis-a-vis every other data needs to be also handled, but then there we need to apply additional caution. And the last one, breach notification, which is a big change and very, very good reason for that change that government has brought in. Look, as an individual, I am a customer of very many organizations. If one organization faces a breach today, breach in the sense that cyber breach, where some of the data is compromised, and they notify me, hey Vikram, your Aadhaar card is compromised. Now I have an opportunity that I can go and reset all my bank account passwords, because we know the linkage. The Aadhaar is now connected to the mobile phone number, and then someone can take over my. So government has mandated this now. So if you have a breach in respective organizations, you not just need to notify the data protection board. You also need to notify impacted individuals. As in, you may have, I'm making this up, maybe 50 lakh individuals' data. But if you have a breach which is impacting 5,000, you need to notify those 5,000, hey, your data and what data is compromised, and you may need to take whatever care that you can take. So this is something which is very specific for DPDPA. And if you look at it, how to enable it, we are talking about deep visibility into what data do we have. We are talking about forensic, akin to forensic capability, so that we can really quickly analyze and say, okay, these are 5,000, so that I can notify. And of course, notification, reach out procedures, processes available, so that we can quickly contact them. So this is something that we would need to enable in our environments. Importance of DPDPA, of course, we have touched these multiple times. Trust and transparency, data security, patient empowerment. Now we're talking about, we need to empower them to take decisions on their data. What do they want to share? Compliance and governance, and of course, innovation with privacy. if you are able to bring privacy first principles, we can then create products which is not just for Indian population. They may become sought after products in the global scenarios also. And of course, we spoke about India-UK collaboration. I'm sure we are having similar discussions from other experts that we want to serve. And this is an enabler in that direction. Okay, other regulations. Once again, DPDPA is a much talked about item, but then there are multiple other regulations which are also, you can say, borderline mandating that we need to take care of data, we need to take care of privacy, whether it is Ayushman Bharat digital mission, whether it is clinical establishments. There are, if you start examining all these various regulations, they have some specific items or subsections which are mandating or guiding that we need to take care of patient data and take care of the privacy around that data or security of the data also. I'll move, and this is one item, and from a natural, then all of us, then whether we like it or not, but then we have ailments, we get admitted, so we would have experiences. Someone is going through a surgery, there's a consent form, and then you are going through a surgery. But then what we need to appreciate is the consent that we are referring here is a bit different than the consent which is there for a surgery. Or so we have three types that we are referring here. One consent is when you get admitted, you need to sign that, okay, we will have some procedures you are signing. But then the middle pillar is what we are referring to here from a personal data protection perspective. Now we need to be very clear, explicit and specific. These are data points that we are requiring, these are use cases that we'll use. And of course, there's the last pillar also. When we are doing any trials, there's a different kind of consent which needs to be taken, because when you do a trial, we don't know everything which is there. So that consent is different, but then three types of consent. And the middle pillar is what we are focusing here today from a privacy perspective. And we need to be, while we may have very robust processes on that consent before a kind of an operation or any medical procedure, etc. But then this one would need a lot of heavy lifting at our end to really know what needs to be done at all interaction points. And I'm really using that word very consciously, all interaction points, because human individual data get collected at IPD, OPD, as in someone is walking in for a test, or just visitors. If we have acquired some data for a visitor, even that's a responsibility. Vendors to our organizations, they are our responsibility. So all human interactions that we have had, they are our responsibilities, and we need to ensure that we are taking care of that data and applying that explicit and specific when we are acquiring consent. And of course, protection and the life cycle management has to happen. Cyber challenges, and once again, a bit of survey tidbit which is available on reports, but then what are your thoughts on hospital staff using personal devices, Gmail? And if you look at it, and very happy to note this response, almost 2/3 of people are saying it should be discouraged, directly, indirectly they are saying. But then what we would need to look at, how do we blend in what is possible and what is right? And while it may become, we use mobile phones, we would need to continue. How do we enable complementing technology control? So we, once again, not getting into details, but then we use a technology called mobile device management. We can containerize what remains official would not get pour into your personal side of the journey, as in on a mobile device also. So we need to think through those processes while we want to enable ease of access, ease of use of data, etc. But then we still want to protect patient information or information of individuals which is coming in. This is just an example, and more are available on the report. And talking about these challenges, ransomware attacks is a reality, medical identity theft is a reality, insider threat, and for whatever reasons, it could be disgruntled employee, it could be silly mistake, or it could be someone who has been compromised by some external factor. But then insider threats would be there. How do we enable controls so that we can at least minimize that kind of impact? Even if someone is committing a mistake or someone is being mischievous or conducting with or doing something which is they should not be doing, but we have to have controls. And IoT and device vulnerabilities, and this is you can say when we adopt a lot of technology, some threats come along with it. Medical devices, while they are getting more and more powerful, but then they also have vulnerabilities, and if they are compromised, then they can become a starting point of a cyber attack. So we need to really manage all these in factors from lifecycle management perspective. And some of the best practices, moving towards the end of my presentation, some of the best practices, and of course, the primary responsibility may remain with your compliance and technology functions. But then if we have all of us, I'm assuming some of us are functional business representatives. So if we have awareness about these, we can support these initiatives when they are being launched by IT or compliance team. So some of these things I spoke about, encryption or securing the storage, role-based access control, we need to think through, and this would need to get enabled by the business functions. IT would only enable it, but we would know who needs to have access. The business function would need to tell, IT would enable it for us. Zero trust approach, this is along with all digital technologies access, we are saying trust nobody and challenge everything and minimize access to absolute need to know basis. That's an approach we want to take from all IT systems perspective. Regular audit and monitoring, which is stepping up on how do we ensure compliance to what the processes that we have written. And vendor risk management, we would have an ecosystem we'd be dependent on. How do we manage that risk? Data minimization, and lastly, consent and transparency, which is a starting point process on all new business processes that we are creating, is something which is need of our way forward. And once again highlighted level of leadership board oversight for patient data privacy. So this is a question we asked. So if you look at it, about 80% is saying some involvement, and we would love to see where there's active involvement, and not just involvement, they are becoming active sponsors of these initiatives. So that's a direction we would love to see. And sort of last slide for me, whether it is HIPAA or GDPR protection or patient-centric consent models, security health, or other standards that we have global best practices available. And if you look at it, while we have DPDP as a law, but privacy principles are uniform across various regulations. So we may want to refer some of these good practices or global practices and create a program for ourselves which is increasing regulatory enforcement, which is also AI driven, while we want to leverage, but then how do we balance it out? Something privacy enhancing technologies, this is about consent management and life cycle of that consent through our environment. And I would safely assume, or at least by my experience, this is must have in some shape and form. We would need to have, if we want to become compliant with DPDPA, we would need to have a privacy enhancing technology, or we engage a consent manager kind of organization which is third party, so that we can really comply. And trust as a competitive differentiator. So we would only be able to bring trust in our environment when we do all these things right, not just from a compliance perspective, but culture and privacy first principles applied. I would stop here. Thank you for your patient hearing.
We would request Chairperson Mr. Opijit Mojumdar to please present a token of our appreciation to Mr. Singh.